Well, hello and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 503 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. And on today's show, we are discussing exactly how to host a clothing swap. Now, let me say at the outset, this show is about swapping anything with friends, books, home goods, kids' toys, kids' clothes, anything you want to swap, we're swapping today. This show is the culmination of three very important topics that we talk about all the time on this show coming together. It's a confluence of sorts. It's about sustainability, reducing fashion waste. It's about anti-consumerism and communal care, sharing resources with those who live around us instead of buying new. And finally, that third pillar, this episode is about what we just talked about last week, rebuilding our villages, seeing people in real life, socializing, rebuilding our friendships that we've lost. So those three pillars of the show are coming together today. And here to share her wisdom with regard to hosting 4 clothing swaps and counting is clothing swap expert Jess Schroeder. Jess is a listener to the show. She reached out to me and she said, "Oh my gosh, we need to talk about clothing swaps." And I said, "Are you game?" And Jess said, "Yes, she is." So she's here to walk us through every single detail of hosting a swap of whatever you want to swap so that we can go back into our communities. We can stop buying new stuff. We can share resources with those that we care about. And so we can see people in real life. Jess, I'm so thrilled to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Okay, so we're talking about clothing. Before we talk about swapping clothing, let's talk about how you have historically acquired clothing for yourself. Mall shopper? Are you a thrifter? Where do you fall? And I ask this because so many people are not receptive to embracing secondhand items. So where are you on the spectrum?
I will say I've dabbled in it all. My first sort of memory of my interaction with used clothing is playing dress up in my grandmother's closet as a child. And she kept everything. She was a bit of a hoarder. So she had all of these really cool clothes from the 50s and 60s that were just in a closet with the mothball smell. I would play dress up with my cousin. And I remember at a certain point trying something on and saying, "I think I'm just going to wear this. I'm going to wear this to school. I like this. It's really cool." My mom helped me have some stuff altered. And then I just would wear some vintage clothes to school. So I think in some ways that was my first sort of acceptance that used clothes aren't necessarily gross. They actually have like a story behind them, in particular vintage clothes. I grew up with mall culture. That's where we would hang out. There's not many places to hang out in South Dakota, but there was a mall. So I would hang out there with my friends and look at those old stores like the Limited and the Gap and look in the windows and wish I could afford some of the things. And sometimes I'd save up my money and buy them. But I think I really had something inside of me that loved this treasure hunt.
Yes, there's so much you said there that I want to piggyback on. The first thing you said that made my ears perk up was you said the Limited and the Gap from the mall. I loved the Limited. My favorite store was Express for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I don't know where I thought I was going in my professional clothing that I got at Express, but I feel like a clothing swap is a great segue into accepting secondhand clothing for people who don't want to accept a stranger's clothes. Like the stranger piece is where I think a lot of would-be thrifters get tripped up, like a stranger wore it. So who knows what they were doing in these clothes, or they're dirty, or that's what goes through a lot of people's mind. I'm not saying I agree with that line of thought. I do not. But a clothing swap, by definition, tends to be with either your friends or people you know or people of people you know. And so it takes away the stranger danger. And I'll be frank, I grew up with a mother who did not thrift. We only accepted secondhand clothes if they were from somebody we knew, like somebody that my mother personally vetted. Otherwise, it was always new clothes. It was cheap new clothes. Like we were not rolling in the dough by any means, Walmart clothes, but they were new clothes. So for any listeners who grew up like I did and have it ingrained in them that new is best, any thoughts for them?
It's something that I was starting to notice in that period of my life when I was spending more time at the mall in the hopes to raise my self-esteem by buying clothing or buying a new shiny object. I noticed this life cycle of clothing. For example, you walk past Madewell and they've got a cute display in the window of a sweater with puffy sleeves. And you think, oh my gosh, I would look really confident in that item. I would really look like I have my life together if I got that. And I think it would be flattering. And the color seems to be really popular right now. I should really go get that puffy sleeve sweater. And then a few weeks later, you go into Madewell and you see that sweater looking very lackluster on the clearance rack. Mm-hmm. And then you watch as that trend slowly trickles away and it's gone. When you start to open your eyes a little bit more to how so much is being marketed to us, and it's not designed to make us feel good about ourselves. It's actually designed to make us feel quite bad about ourselves, like we need more and more. And when you start to look at just capitalism in general, but if you look at things marketed toward women in particular, these companies are depending on us to buy their items to try to increase our own self-esteem when we know that this is not really the answer. It might give you a short-term boost, but it's not the answer. And the real sense of style and the sense of knowing yourself, as far as I'm concerned, is not paying as much attention to what is trending, but paying attention to what you like, just what you like. And who cares if it's from 3 seasons ago? And who cares if it's not, quote, flattering? You should wear the thing that you like because it will make you feel good. And then you walk a little bit taller. It now makes me just first seethe with anger because they're just trying to sell us more crap. And then it makes me really sad because I think about people who are trying to find their sense of self and their self-esteem through these big companies who are just trying to sell us stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about the bandwagon analogy, right? Like we can hop on the trend bandwagon, spend a ton of money keeping up with the trend, staying on that bandwagon, or we can just hop off. We can hop off and walk, right? Yes. But then I'm just thinking too, the price of clothing has dropped dramatically over the last 20 to 30 years. And because a shirt can now cost as low as $1.99, let's say, so many of us are just buying more and more new clothes. I read a stat in preparing for our chat, Jess, that the average American now has 5 times more clothing than their grandparents had. And I don't see that trend changing much because, again, when goods are cheap, human beings, maybe it's an innate characteristic, maybe it's a learned behavior from our consumerist culture, but we tend to acquire, consume. Do you have anything to say to listeners who are cynical like me and are thinking to themselves, yes, clothing swaps are great because we're not buying new stuff. We're not giving our money to the fashion industry, let's say, but it's not doing anything to solve the root problem, which is we have a cultural love of mass quantities of cheaply produced goods.
As with anything, I think you do a good job on your podcast of addressing this, is no step in the right direction is going to be taken perfectly. If I continue to provide opportunities for people to be open to utilizing used items, I do think it starts to create an open-mindedness in them about used items. And as you were talking about fast fashion or how cheap it is to produce goods, I was reflecting on how my thought about used clothing has evolved over time is I actually see used clothing as more valuable than new clothing because there's something about it. And I shop a lot on Poshmark as well and ThredUp and in some of the more curated thrift stores. And when I see an item that I can tell was around 10 or 15 years ago and it's still standing, baby, there's something about it that just lights up a little brighter for me. It looks more attractive to me because it has stood the test of time. This was really special to someone and now it's made its way toward me. And I don't know how to, you can't convince people of that who are used to dropping $500 at Nordstrom every week. I think that's going to be a hard sell. But if you can bring them into a clothing swap and they find a denim jacket that they really love that's just a little bit worn in, because you can't buy them like that most of the time, and they find something they really love and they see the value in a used item, I think you can slowly start to change people's minds about what it means to acquire a used item. Something else I would say is I think a lot of people, regardless of their socioeconomic status, are pretty open to the idea of passing down children's clothing. I think there's a little less maybe of a ick factor in that for a lot of people. And I don't know about you, but when I am at the park and I see one of the kids in the neighborhood who got the hand-me-down Star Wars shirt for my child, I feel so much pride and joy. I do think that there is an aspect of that a lot of people feel when they share their children's clothing or their old toys. And you can grab that joy for yourself as an adult too. And it's a way to love and support the other people in your life.
As you're talking, Jess, I'm thinking about how you as a clothing swap host, you're a system disruptor at the end of the day. If one person who's never worn a secondhand piece of clothing leaves your home with one secondhand shirt, let's say, you've disrupted the system. Like you've just introduced them to the power and beauty of sharing communal resources, accepting something that's pre-loved. And that is a beautiful thing with ripple effects. Like you might not see or hear what that person does in their own circle. They're likely telling everybody they went to a clothing swap and I got this shirt there, and it ripples out from there. And so what I hear you saying is that we might not be fixing or solving or really even putting a dent in the fast fashion crisis, let's say, by hosting a clothing swap. But we should still do it anyway, because number one, there's ripple effects, because number two, it's fun, because number three, it's a win-win for everybody. So tell me about your first clothing swap and what hooked you.
My first clothing swap, my friend Betsy invited me, and it was put on by a charity here in San Diego. And it was, I believe the only instructions were to bring a bag of clothes in good condition. I think we had to pay $20 at the door. And it was a huge warehouse. You handed off your bag and they had workers there that were organizing all the clothes into different sections. And then they were picking out the most beautiful items that people had donated. And they actually had a fashion show. And you could bid, they were auctioning off the highest quality items. It was amazing. I bet there were probably close to 100 people at this swap. And I was hooked because I met all these cool women there. And it was just this atmosphere of people who were trying out new things. And honestly, I think what appeals to me so much about this concept is the thought of playing dress up with other women. Because at least in my experiences with clothing swaps, this is what starts to happen. And you try on something that you would say, oh, I've never worn this before, but I wonder how it would look. And your friend who donated it says, yeah, I really liked that. And gosh, it was so expensive. The hem didn't hit me quite right. see how it looks. Let's see how you look. And you go and try it on and do a spin and everybody claps. And it's this really fun atmosphere. And that is how the first clothing swap felt. I remember after it, I was keeping my clothing after that. The clothing that I normally would have donated somewhere, I kept it all in a box and I was waiting for it to happen again. And it never happened again. They never threw that swap again. And so that was in the back of my head for many years that I really want to recreate that for myself with my friends, because in addition to the fun time I had, I got some really cool new clothes.
Okay, so your first foray into clothing swaps was this amazing, gigantic event in your community. I'll say my first foray into a clothing swap was a friend from high school. Shout out to Megan if she's listening. Invited her friends over. We all brought clothes. We sat on her floor. We picked through the piles and we drank wine and we chit-chatted. So it could be low end, my experience, like high end, your experience, or somewhere in between. When did you start hosting clothing swaps? And tell me about that. What's it like to host one?
It's overwhelming the first time. I remember when I threw my first one, I think that was in 2019. I looked all over the internet for some sort of guide. And I found a few things here or there, but I felt like I was going in a little bit blind. But I constructed an evite and sent it to my friends. And what I did not want to happen is I send out an invite and someone says, oh my gosh, I just dropped off 10 trash bags at Goodwill. So I sent out the invite quite early and explained the purpose. To be honest with you, I invited a lot of people. I think the first one, maybe like 12 people came. And there were some people I didn't know super well who showed up to the swap. And I felt like it was really important to open the event with, we're all here. We're here to meet new people. We're here to encourage each other. We're here to support each other. And we're here to get some cool new stuff. And I do think that just saying a couple words like that does set the tone. In my head, I was thinking, I remember the first one, I was like, what if someone just grabs a bunch of stuff? What am I going to say? But we're dealing with other adults who are functioning in the world, and we have to trust each other. That has never happened, that someone's like hoarding or anything. I've only experienced during the 4 swaps that I've hosted, people who are so generous with each other. But I think, yes, not marketing this as a come get a whole bunch of crap, more as let's just hang out together and encourage each other and try and play dress up together.
Sustainable Minimalist is sponsored by BetterHelp, and it is the season of fright, is it not? Want to know something that scares me? Being perpetually misunderstood in my closest relationships. I know, real spooky, right? Now is the perfect time to face our big fears, and therapy is a great tool for finding ways to overcome them. Maybe you want to learn better coping skills. Perhaps you'd like to practice establishing better boundaries. BetterHelp can help with all of that and more. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/minimal today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/minimal. Okay, so we're going to rapid fire this, if that's okay with you, Jess. I'm just going to ask some questions because I'm sure we have listeners hearing us talk right now and they're like, okay, I'm interested. I'll host one. I want to see my friends that I haven't seen in a while. I want to purge my closet. I want to maybe get some new to me items. Like, it sounds like a win-win-win, really, frankly, at the end of the day. But they don't know how to do it. You said you've hosted 4 swaps. Is there, in your opinion, a magic number of people to have or invite?
I will say I invite a lot of people. Usually 10 to 15 people come. I do think that's a really good number, but I think it's hard to predict who's going to come. I believe in casting a wide net. So I really like to get new people to come. Then I get to meet a new person also, which is very fun.
Yeah, it sounds great for our social circles. How about we host a clothing swap? That sounds like a great way to rebuild a village.
Yeah.
Okay, so 10 to 15 people, that sounds good. Do you put any parameters on what people can bring, like a number or no accessories or no shoes or any parameters on the clothing items that people show up with?
Great question. And that has evolved. And it actually brings up an important point about size inclusivity, because that was one of my big fears in throwing my first swaps is I didn't want people to feel poorly, like they would show up and there wouldn't be anything in their size. I think it's important to have a wide variety, not only of sizes, but of types of things. The first swap, it was like, just bring your old stuff. Then over time, it's evolved into I instruct people to focus on trying to bring 10 to 15 items that are in good quality, like without holes or stains. And I do allow and in fact encourage shoes, accessories. They could grab a hat. There's some other segues into this that you can still embrace people into the process, even if they're not totally comfortable with the clothing aspect of it yet.
Or they could leave with nothing, right? If they want to just responsibly clear out their own closet, they could come, stay for a snack, a glass of wine perhaps, and leave empty-handed.
Absolutely, they could.
Yeah, there's something for everybody, right? Yeah. Going back to the size inclusivity ideal that hosts should and can strive for, did you do anything special in that regard to make sure that everybody, regardless of shape, size, had somebody potentially to swap with? Or was it more organic? You just let it happen as it unfolded?
I put in my invite, all sizes are welcome and celebrated. And as I said before, I do cast a pretty wide net. And I'm not like trying to scope out people of certain sizes. That's not it at all.
Yeah, that's awkward.
That would be very strange. But I do, like I said, I'm always on the lookout for some more people to join my community. And when I meet people who conversations with me signal to me that they're interested in sustainability in some way, this is a good segue. And it just so happens when you meet a lot of people, as I tend to, you meet a lot of people to invite to this swap.
Okay, my biggest question, Jess, is how do you organize the clothes? I said at my very informal one, when we walked in the door with our items, there were like little signs, like the smaller sizes over here, medium, large, all that. And we just threw them in a big pile. But I'm wondering whether an event is more seamless when they're hung up. How do you present the items?
This has also evolved over time. My first one, I held it inside of my house and I just had some tables set up and things heaped onto table. But in the ones after, I have in my backyard, I have a pergola, and I started using a building set that my child has. There's like those plastic tubes that they can build forts with and stuff. And I fashioned those into clothing racks that hung from the sides of the pergola. I asked people to bring extra hangers. People have so many hangers. Oh my goodness. And they're dying to get rid of them. I still have tables, which I crowdsource. People who are coming and say, hey, can you bring your folding table? Because I think it goes along with a lot of what we've already been talking about. Like, you have a community of people. Why should I buy 5 folding tables? Everybody has one. They can just bring it along. It's part of the kind of community aspect of the swap. I can never anticipate how much people are going to bring. So I always have a tarp ready. And I just put a tarp on the grass and you can just dump all the stuff on the tarp. But I do think the way that it's presented is important. Most of the clothing, in particular dresses and jackets and blouses and things like that, are hanging up. And I think it does add to the event to have it spiffed up a little bit like that.
I'm thinking about the mall again. I'm thinking about Express, my favorite store from when I was 20. If I walked into Express and all the clothes were in a pile on the floor, I would not be nearly as excited to try something on as opposed to if it was hung up and pressed and looking nice, right? So appearance really matters when it comes to clothing. And I love your suggestion of asking people to bring their hangers. So you're not running around hanging up everybody else's clothes. They can do it themselves. I love that. Yeah. And as we're talking, Jess, I'm just thinking about how these clothing swaps that you host, they are the epitome of communal care. And this is what capitalism is scared of, let's say, if capitalism doesn't have feelings. But look at what is happening. Like, you guys are sharing resources. No money is being exchanged. No stakeholders' pockets are being padded as we're refreshing our closets with new items. Like, this is communal care, people working together and sharing resources epitomized. I love that. Okay, but I have a couple more like logistical questions. Yeah. And the next one comes with food and drink. You ask people to bring hangers. Do you ask them to bring a food or drink item as well to take some work stress off your plate?
Absolutely. I love a potluck and I love the different things that people bring. And it's never anything fancy, just crunchy little snacks and things like that.
Yeah, I like that. And then just in terms of what people bring, have you found that some people bring like high fashion and some people bring fast fashion, and the people who are there looking for high fashion are disappointed? Or like, is that a problem, or am I just making up a problem that doesn't exist?
I was worried about that, I will say. The first one that I held, I think it probably just speaks to the wonderful women in my life that none of my friends are snobs. They're just really nice people. And I don't know anyone to turn up their nose on something because of a brand. At least they're not doing it at the swap out loud. But some people bring really nice items with the tags still on them. And then you have all the way down to a ragged Old Navy t-shirt. There's all kinds of stuff there. And I'm actually like super stoked when I see the fast fashion items, the H&M and the Shein and stuff, because I'm like, wow, this is usually is going to go in the trash, but some might actually want to wear this again. This is pretty cool that even if it gets just one more run, it got one more run. Somebody wore it to work one day. The idea of that is very inspiring to me.
Yeah, you've extended its life, even if it's just for one more day. That is something. That's something to celebrate. Is there anything else you'd like to add for people listening to us right now and are thinking, oh, I could do that. I could host a clothing swap. Yes. Any final tips? Tips?
Absolutely. Pro tips. I have a few. One I would say is I think name tags are very important. I'm the host. I make the rules. Everyone's wearing a name tag. Part of what I did, at least the last swap, is the name tags had different colors on them. When everybody gets there, we spend about a half an hour and people organize their clothes into the different areas. And while they're doing that, they're looking at the things other people brought, starting to browse. And then when everybody gets there, I make an announcement and I either put the people into teams, or the last one with the name tags, I said, hey, your name tag color is your team. When it is your team's turn, you're going to get 5 minutes to shop. And at the end of the 5 minutes, you get to keep 3 items. And then the next team goes. And then I think usually I have 3 different teams. And we keep cycling until we are satisfied. And I actually have signs up in my backyard that show how the afternoon is going to go, so people know what to expect. And then I just have a little timer that goes off every 5 minutes. And usually I would say after about 3 rounds, people got what they wanted. At the end of when we all decide we're done, then it's open. You can grab whatever items of someone else's you want and take those. It's just take what you want at that point. I tell people they can leave it at my house and I will find a home for it. I think this is where actually someone who's hosting this, who is doing it with the mindset that they want to help reduce waste, if you're doing it with this mindset, this is where the real work might take place for you, because you research locally in your own community, where could clothing items or home items go that they would do the most good. I do tell people in the invitation that you can bring even like a mismatched sock with a bunch of holes in it. You could bring that too, and we can put it in the textiles for recycling bin.
I love that idea. If you're going to be donating clothes anyway, why not also donate people's old stained items as well, the old towels? I love that. Yeah, you're making responsible decluttering easy for your guests. That's great. Any other pro tips before we say goodbye?
I want to shout out a Instagram account. Her name is Sophie Strauss, and she is a stylist out of LA who primarily works with used clothing. She shows her outfits and things like that. And her business model is in helping people to go through their own closets to figure out how to put outfits together with what they already have. And then she actually has a service where she goes thrift shopping with people to pick out pieces that might help to bring more of their wardrobe together. On her account and with her presence, and she's so stylish and she's so cute, she shows what it looks like to live in your style that you like. You need to trust your inner knowing about yourself and what you feel good in instead of what people are telling you to like.
I like it. And I love that a clothing swap is a low stakes way to maybe be a little daring in your wardrobe choices. It's low stakes because you're not spending money, right?
Exactly. And things will come. Sometimes there's a very, very loud item at the clothing swap that everyone's eye is drawn to, but no one's quite brave enough to take it. And sometimes that item comes back the next year. And that's okay.
Yeah, I love that. Jess, I just want to thank you so much for, number one, emailing me about this topic that I've never covered. Number two, coming on the show and offering up all your pro tips. And number three, sending me photos. I think you're going to send me the text on your invitation. If you don't mind, I would love to be able to share that with anybody that is interested. Because I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed about the thought of trying something new, inviting people over. What if it's a bust? But your experience, your expertise is really helpful. So I'm interested. I think I might do it. And so thank you so much for your time. Listeners, that's a wrap, my friends. Show notes are at mamaminimalist.com/503. And in about 2 to 3 days from release date, so by the end of this week, I'm going to be releasing a newsletter with photos from Jess's most recent clothing swap, with the verbiage from the invitation she sends out, with all the tips and tricks plus more in this week's newsletter. So if you want all of that, but you're not on the newsletter, there's a link to subscribe in the show notes for free. And while you're there, hey, if you love this show, please consider supporting it with $5 a month or $50-ish a year. You'd have my eternal gratitude. This show is not financially stable, and either it becomes financially stable or Stephanie has to close shop and go get a real job. So thank you for your support. If this show means something to you in your life, please consider supporting it. Thursday's show is subscriber only, so there's another reason to subscribe if you want Thursday's show. Come on over and support as a subscriber. I'll see you then, and take care.